So, valuing Samsung Electronics after the announcement by JY Lee, right, in May 6th, right? Um, After such an announcement, here are some questions you need to ask about. It is, guys, right? Um, was there anything new about future cash flow and risk? Because value is about two things, two channels. Remember, cash flow and discount rate, the risk, right? So, was his announcement affecting any of these about Samsung Electronics? So, was there any investment plan announced or divestiture? It should affect cash flow, but there was nothing new about it. He said something about labor union issues, right? He will. Oh, come on, why did not you guys have a labor union in the first place in 1980s? So much so that it will be natural by now in managing all this kind of democratic labor union relations management, and then unionization. Oh, that's so much troublesome. The trouble is you have to learn from now. But whereas Hyundai Motors and these kind of guys, they've been experiencing. Okay, they are well experienced. Why didn't you do it? But anyway, they are now doing it. Okay, but it was quite expected. The thing is, the allowing for labor unions working in their organizing in their Samsung Electronics. Okay, it was quite expected long before, right? Like 6 months ago or something. It's nothing new. Okay, is the top guy leaving or staying because of ROE concern, right? ROEs. Or efficient management or something like that. 15%, you saw that, right? 0.6% or something. He's staying there, right? ROE will be similar, I guess, right? He said, my kids will not succeed me, but he's in his early 50s, right? People usually retire in 65 or 70, right? Succession plan? Come on. Good luck, right? 15 years down the road, maybe. So it's not directly affecting those kind of things in the short run anyway. Okay. Plus, what if his kids say that, no, why, daddy, why did you say that? I will be succeeding in the company. Give me the company, right? They can still say that and then reclaim it somehow. Think about politicians. How many times do they retire and then come back to the stage? 서태지, ever since, those entertainers as well, 은퇴 선언, and then just come back. We don't know. Okay. Of course, I buy Jae-yong's seriousness and sincerity. Okay, we buy all those things, but in reality, things can happen. And then reduction of CEO risk, right? The governance issue. Okay. There are so many things. I mean, because those owner families, or not the owners, right? Because they don't own that much of the shareholdings, right? Out of 100%, what they own is just the 8% or like less than 10% or something, and they still control, but not the ownership. But the founding family is more precise terminology. The people from founding family or royal families, right? They sometimes, hopefully most of the time they do right things, but sometimes they do very unwanted, unpleasant things that negatively affects shareholder value, screws up the shareholders sometimes. Okay, that kind of thing is called CEO risk in Korea. Okay, but the thing is this a systematic risk or idiosyncratic risk? What did I say? The farting of the Lee Jae-yong, right? Or farting of Jung Hee-sun, right? 독방구 kind of things. Firm specific, not systematic. Come on. So is this thing something to be praised? We don't know. Okay. In standard finance, they say no. Okay. So let's see. Now, how about the sales growth? Okay, in FCFE, in the end, you need to have some good idea about the growth of the company, not just in net income, but also in sales. The big picture growth comes first. Okay, even though I said ROE times retention ratio should be net income growth rate, that's for mathematical computation purpose or for the bottom line. But what about the top line? Okay, the big picture, the size of the company, sales is the biggest one, the most important one, right? How would it grow? Depending on this, you will have to choose the growth model, right? Cash flow projections, right? Depending on its life cycle, the company and its strategy in product market, the sales growth matters a lot. It is analogous to the growth of sales, right? It's analogous to infection graph of COVID-19, different countries, right? You saw this virus spreading out, how speedily it goes, and after some point, inflection point, it tapers off and then reduces, right? Likewise, the life cycle of the company will be like that. Okay, there will be initial stage, there will be fast growing stage, there will be tapering off, old mature stage. Okay, where does this company stand? Depending on this, you will have to pick what is the best growth projection model. Okay, should we use one stage model or two stage model or three stage model? Okay, so go back in history as much as possible. Big data, whatever. Yeah, this is the discipline that you use, big data. Okay, accounting data, not just use 3 years, 4 years data. Okay, you need as many years as possible in doing DCF model, discounted free cash flow model. Okay, now Samsung Electronics sales figure is shown over here. I downloaded it from data guide. Data guide. You can install this software in computer inside campus somehow. Okay, you cannot access it, so much so that I shared it in your Google Drive. I downloaded it myself and then shared it with you. So ever since 1981, things are shown over here. Okay, sales figure, and now we are standing over here. Okay, and Samsung Electronics, is it in a young stage or fast growing stage or mature stage? Okay, it's obvious, right? And then some of you may say, let's take the logarithmic scale, because those things that happened in the previous, this 1980s and 90s doesn't seem to be represented well. But if we change the scale into logarithmic scale, it's even clearer that the Samsung's sales has been tapering off, and then it's stagnant. Okay, it's not growing that much. Okay, clearly the growth is slowed down, which is natural. Okay, no time to panic. Okay, no, don't panic, right? They got the biggest market share in memory chip semiconductor market of the world, and not much room is left for growth. Galaxy cell phone, they say, okay, may be important, but not much contribution to their profit due to their price, the low price and low margin compared to iPhone, right? Plus, Huawei is eating up their market. Okay, one may say, how about smart cars and then the smart city kind of things? But who knows, right? That might be, okay, that might be, but we don't know. We just need one stable growth model based on this figure. Okay, and then sales growth would be 2.5%, which is World Bank's expectation of world GDP growth in 2020. There must be ups and downs in the infinite horizon, but upward potential would be offset by downside risk coming from COVID-19 kind of virus, right? I tried to impose some growth rate of sales over here, but things will not be necessary in the FCFE calculation, because FCFE calculation, what you need is the growth rate of net income, not the growth rate of sales. Okay, all I try to argue over here is to justify my usage of one stage growth model. One stage, slow growth. Okay, it's pretty much has grown, it's pretty much mature enough. Okay, now assumption and information. Last year's sales of Samsung was 230 trillion Korean won. Okay, 230조 원, right? Last year's net income was about 10% or less of them, 21.7 trillion Korean won. ROE is expected to be historical average during JY Lee's tenure until now, which is 15.2%. Let's assume that the cost of equity is 9.5% for the sake of simplicity. Of course, in practice, you will need to construct this via CAPM. Okay, in your I-Corp project, whatever company it may be, this is a secret, but you will have to compute your estimate your cost of equity using CAPM. How about equity reinvestment rate? This should also depend on top management style in capital structure decision, how to invest in capex and working capital, etc. Now, equity reinvestment rate, I also got the history of it based on data guides data about Samsung Electronics. You see, what you see on the left hand side is not the percentage figure but decimal number, which is like 2 times, 4 times kind of things. 2.00, 4.00. What you see is minus 1100% happened. Okay, equity reinvestment rate. Okay, 1996 was the year. This was the year when they had negative net income. I told you before, Samsung is in DRAM industry, which is by nature very cyclical. It was in the down cycle, miserable net income. That's why we had that kind of minus 1100% equity reinvestment rate. I say this is an outlier, so I say take it out. So once I take it out, okay, it disappeared. And then equity reinvestment rates history looks like this. And you know, Lee Byung-chul was there, Lee Gun-hee was there, and then Lee Jae-yong is now here. Okay, and then notice one thing, that ERR can be greater than 1. You see, greater than 1 over here, right? When the company was young, right, you invest a lot. Okay, equity reinvestment rate could exceed 100%. Okay. In contrast, in dividend discount model, what you multiplied to ROE to get growth rate was not ERR but what? Retention ratio. The retention ratio was capped at 1 over here. Okay, so that was not flexible enough to take care of this kind of young stage companies over here. ERR being greater than 1. Okay. Now standing over here, going into the future, right? What you care about is the ERR during JY Lee's era. Okay, 25.5% ERR will be there. Okay, and then so growth rate of net income will be 3.88% because you will multiply 15.2% of ROE and then 25.5% of ERR, right? Again, these are something that I just imposed, or I assumed that things will be similar to the past during JY Lee's reign, okay? Because he's not going anywhere, right? So as long as he will be there, net income will grow at about 4% rate. Now, based on this, what do we do? Well, recall that we are using this framework. Net income times 1 minus ERR should be FCFE. Let's calculate this guy now. And then also, this one has to be T plus 1. So we have to grow net income first, right? Grow net income at 3.88% and multiply this guy, right? So that will be it. Now, last year's sales net income is given. This year's net income will be growing at 3.88%. That will be 22.58 trillion Korean won, right? Immediately I used net income growth rate. And therefore FCFE should be 22.581 multiplied by 1 minus ERR, that is 25.5%, which is coming from this and that over here. Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, therefore FCFE 1 will be 16.8 trillion won, and then based on it, market value of equity should be 16.823 trillion won divided by R minus G. R is assumed to be 9.8%, and then minus growth rate of 3.88% of net income growth rate, right? And then that gives me 299.3 trillion Korean won. Okay, and then let's divide this guy by the number of shares outstanding, which is 5.9 billion shares. So if you do the math, you will realize fair value per share of Samsung Electronics will be 50 Korean won. Okay, and then as a reference, current share price is 48.8 thousand Korean won. 50,000 versus 48.8, only 2.7% upward potential. Okay, upward potential. Should I say buy recommendation? And the answer is not really. Okay. Oh, some of you may say, oh, this is still 2.5%, 2.7% up. Isn't it great? Well, if you're writing 용비어천가 or some flattering words to Jae-Yong Lee, maybe you want to say buy, but hold. Come on, this is not even close to buy anything. This is just a range, within a range of, random bouncing back and forth. And perhaps this is why the investors were not positively or negatively surprised at Lee Jae-Yong's announcement on May 6th, right over here. Okay, until today or the day before, right? The price change was very, very minimal. Okay, not much of a change. Okay, so that's that, right? Not much of a message was there, even though he was very sincere, right? I wish personally Jae-Yong Lee be more forthcoming like this. Come to the media. He's good looking. Okay, positive side of Jae-Yong Lee. He's good looking, right? Why don't you take advantage of it and then come to the media and then be more forthcoming about what you have in mind. Communicate well with the investors. So, convince those investors with your, interviews and all these kind of things. That will work for you. Okay, that's it. Here we simplified a lot, but sometimes you will have to make assumptions about the investments like change in working capital and net capex. Okay, right. By the way, forthcoming of the CEOs, right? Communicative CEOs, make these the company more transparent, easier to understand the company. It's better for the stock price because those information will get priced very quickly, right? Until now, Samsung's management have been very, very secretive, which like 비밀주의, like Japanese. I don't know why they have to follow Japan style. Okay, first of all, we are not Japan. Okay, second, lack of communication is not a good thing in global market, and we follow Western democratic society. Korea is the most democratized society in the first place. Shareholders are more advanced like that. compared to Japan. Okay, of course, the market size is big, but democratization, not that much. Shareholders awareness is a lot more advanced in Korea. Okay, so you have to be more forthcoming. Okay, and release your stress. Don't get stressed up. Samsung is too much known for its stressed up culture. Like, you have to be perfect. If you're not perfect, you get killed. Absolute best of the best kind of, impression does not work these days. Okay, get some life, man. It's okay. It's okay. Let's breathe. Right. So breathe together with the investors. Come on. That's it. At least Jae-young looks good, right? Good face. It's advantage. Great advantage. Anyway, of course there are some litigation issues that they have to take care, but after that, working capital, and then what is that? Sometimes you would have to make assumptions about the investments, like change in working capital and net capex. But the key message over here is that those things, you would have to link it to sales. Okay, working capital and capital expenditure, this is to support your sales, so it should be proportional to your sales amount going into the future. Okay, estimate non-cash working capital as a proportion of revenues or sales. They mean the same thing. Some firms have negative non-cash working capital sometimes, but to be conservative, keep it zero or positive. That's the message. In following charts, I will show the historical time series plot of non-cash working capital and the net capex as a percentage of sales to give you some good idea about why I say such things, right? Here's Naver. The blue line is percentage of working capital relative to their sales. Green line is net capex relative to their sales. As you see, Naver in their young stage, right after IPOs, right, they were investing a lot. That's why you have such a high spiking net capex relative to the sales, right? But afterwards, it's pretty much staying at the stable rate of less than 10%, right? Working capital has been there. It has been smooth, but in the range of 20% or something recent period. Initial period, they also had high working capital percentage because young stage, you need to be ready to expand your sales with with a lot more readiness in your inventory. Invest a lot in inventory and in fixed assets, likewise. SK Telecom, in their young stage, they were investing a lot, but afterwards it's pretty much just there in the 10% or low level, 1% level. Working capital has been there, okay, in stable business. Telecommunication, why is that the case? The nature of it is that once you set up those infrastructure of telecommunication, there's nothing much you have to spend, right? So that's why. KT&G, right? Their working capital versus net capex is there. Of course, this is well-established industry, so you don't need to invest a lot in capex. In contrast, working capital, you need a lot more preparation in inventories for, I don't know, they may have to have a lot of tobaccos and in their shelves, right? Maybe for whatever reason it may be, or it may be their management style. For this part, working capital level, you may need to compare this with British Tobacco or some other competitors in tobacco industry. Okay. Now KEPCO, also infrastructure-wise, they initially invest a lot, but these days not much. And then working capital, that has been there. and then POSCO as well. They try to have some stable working capital percentage. You see some fluctuations over here compared to the picture before, but you see the scale difference, right? So it's more magnified to your eyes. Anyway, that's that. SK Hynix, very volatile capex is happening, okay, which is not suggestible, but recently they have been, stabilized in terms of capital expenditure as the SK took over this company, and then they are managing it better than before. And then working capital has been managed at the 20 to 40% range, right? Now, let's move down to Hyundai Motors. Sometimes they hit the zero inventory kind of things, zero working capital, but don't assume that kind of things will happen again in the future. Just to be conservative, you need to have some inventory to keep your sales going. Okay, for example, Palisade, come on, that SUV, right? Recently in 2019, Palisade was so much popular, and then the investors, not the investors, but the consumers demanded it, whereas the company did not have inventory. Inventory zero. No good. You lost customers. So you need to have some inventory, positive, right? Kia Motors is there, right? And then Samsung Electronics, right? Their inventory or working capital level is 20% range or something. You can see it. And then NCE 2.9%, right? That's what's been happening. So go ahead and read it. It's self-evident. How about debt to invested capital ratio? Okay, again, it will follow the management style of J.Y. Lee. So let's look at history. Okay, the top guys, right, and then top management team, their strategic direction and all these things affect a lot in terms of capital structure. Okay, if you look back in history of Samsung, right, in 이병철's age, right, 이병철 회장님, right, during this period, almost 80% of their investment was financed through borrowing, bank borrowing. Can you believe that? 20% invested from equity side and 80% coming from the bank. So debt to equity ratio, book value wise, was what? 4 times. Can you believe that? Right, 4 times. 8 to 2, so 4 times. This was a time when people said doing the business with your own money is the most stupid things. Why? Because the government guarantees you to do business so that you can borrow bank money so much, right? Leverage up so much. Okay, that was the time. Samsung was one of them. Chaebols, all these chaebols, right, were doing the same thing. And Lee Gun-hee took over this position, and then Mr. Lee Gun-hee managed until 2014, and there was a drastic reduction of this debt to invested capital ratio. Essentially, the leverage ratio had to go down by force. Why is that the case? I'm going to talk about it later. And then JY's age is over here. Okay, about 6.8%. 6.8%. Debt to invested capital ratio. There was a time when chaebols tried to finance most of their business from debt market because government policy guaranteed them. 개발 독재 시대, right? Low bankruptcy cost to chaebols, right? If you hit the bankruptcy, no way. The government will take care of you so that you will not hit bankruptcy, right? So they will save you from any troubles as long as you are doing export business, exporting. Okay, so that was a time of economic development of the whole country. Now, with the 1997 East Asian financial crisis, or you call it IMF crisis, when you guys were born or before, those days of crony capitalism are gone. Okay, before 1997, there was low bankruptcy cost, but as long as you borrow money, okay, there is some interest tax shield that you can enjoy. You remember interest tax shield before? Interest expense is tax deductible, so that you want to borrow more, right? But what stops you from borrowing is the bankruptcy cost. But the bankruptcy cost is minimal, very, very small in 1980s, so that you borrow as much as possible. That was what was happening in Lee Byung-chul's age over there, right? Over here, right? There's a trade-off between bankruptcy cost and your interest tax shield. That's something called the trade-off theory of capital structure. A very important one. I'm going to ask you this one in your final exam. Okay, Samsung was leading the way to reduce the dependence on borrowed money over the past 2 decades to reduce bankruptcy costs associated with borrowing. However, they still borrow certain amount because there is interest tax benefit, tax shield, right? Which makes borrowing advantageous. Here there is a trade-off, right? As I said before, this is capital structure theory trade-off. And so that's that. If you have any questions, please ask me using the, the email address that you see above over here, right? Thanks for watching, and then make sure you click like and then subscribe. Okay, bye bye.